We're getting there. Okay, we're there. Okay, so welcome. Um, this is going to be kind of a Wilderness Canoe Association presentation. The original presentation deck was made for the Five Winds Backcountry Ski and Snowshoe Club. We're both kind of clubs out of the Toronto base. I was a member of the Five Winds for many years, and I was the actual president from 2015 to 21. And then simultaneously, with an overlap, I was the chairman of the WCA from 2018 to 2024. I find boat clubs are very complementary. I tended to go winter stuff with Five Winds, of course, and then when the water ice melted, I would revert to canoeing, rivers and lakes and whatever. And there's a lot of people actually in boat clubs, so check out boat clubs basically. So Traveling on Ice 101 is this lecture or presentation. When I was giving it to Five Winds, I reminded people they're responsible for their own safety, of course, and they should carry the gear that we recommended for emergencies. And that club had a presentation that we put together. What should I have in my day pack? So we would drive up to Muskoka somewhere and then ski, snowshoe around for 5, 6 hours, basically all day, and then work our way back to the bus and then come back to Toronto. And that was like a full day activity. And this is a classic thing, crossing a lake and a certain amount of powder. The groups would head out with anywhere from like 4 to 8 people per group. And then you'd have like the fast people, the not so fast people, the medium people, the slower people. So generally the groups would, pick a route or retrace somebody else's trail. And, maybe the fast people would go 20K and the medium people go 15 and the slow people go 10, over the 4 or 5 hours. But you basically traverse all these kind of terrains. So back to the presentation. This presentation is going to hit these points. The danger of ice, how does ice form, risk mitigation and management, create an emergency kit, research the conditions before you go on your route, plan your route, assessing the situations when you come on something, and individual and group rescue procedures. And once say you got a wet foot or total immersion, what should you do? So the thing only starts after you get out of the water because you're out there and you could be 2, 3 hours from the bus. So what would you do? And then after the event, this is going back home, you kind of digest, okay, what worked, what didn't work. And in Five Winds case, you'd write an incident report. And then other sources of information you could draw on, and then a summary. So the first thing is ice crossing. You're coming along and you hit a big body of water. It could be a pond, small lake, big lake, river, whatever. So, first question is it safe? So you kind of look at it, okay, how thick is the ice? Will the ice hold me? What's the lowest risk way across? Is there a high risk area that I should avoid? And what should I do if someone falls in, etc. There's no such thing as, safe, 100% safe ice, but what I'm going to try to explain to you, there are high risk areas and low risk areas. And if you wanted to, go on the ice, you want to go for the low risk areas, of course. So it's all about risk mitigation and benefits. You can have zero risk. You just stay home and don't go on the bus, don't go out, don't paddle, don't do this, don't do that. You'll have zero risk, but you'll have a boring life. So most of us pick some kind of risk, and we all have these risk circles where the first inner circle is you're very comfortable. The next is you're learning, and the next risk circle is you're, in a panic zone. You went beyond your capabilities. So same thing here. You're assessing based on your background. If you're used to walking on ice, you have a bigger circle than people that are not used to walking on ice. So this presentation will show you some stuff to look for. So step one is to understand how ice forms. So I'll go quickly through this because I think Richard hit on this at the last presentation a bit. But basically, when it's cold in the early winter, the first thing that happens, the ice, the water freezes on the surface and creates crystals, and you can actually watch the crystals grow if you're on like a little pond that you can overlook them. And it makes this sound like, I don't know, I'll have to show you, but I have some slides up ahead that has a movie about ice forming. But it grows these crystals, and eventually you get they could call it black ice or blue ice. It depends on Ontario, Quebec. When you look down in the lake, everything's black. The water looks black. So when you're looking at the ice, it's really clear ice, but you're looking at the black below it. So it comes across as black ice. But if you were on some maybe Alberta lake where it was glacier fed, it would be turquoise blue ice because you're looking through the clear at the turquoise kind of water. So at the end of the day, it's like a clear ice, and it's a pretty strong ice. Um, and it's just not that thick. So usually on a one-nighter, if it's right on the edge of growing, maybe that first day, you might grow a quarter inch of ice thickness, that kind of things. I've seen it once. There was open water, and the next morning we woke up and I threw a big rock and it stuck in the ice. So it was a good half inch thick. So, it depends on the conditions, but you'll grow quarter inch, half inch a night for sure. So you've got the water, and ice is expanded, so it's slightly lighter than the water. So the water below is, say, 0 to 4 degrees, that kind of range, and the ice is zero, so it's floating on top. And of course, the outside temperature is, -10 or something. And then what happens is you get a snowfall, and the snow is heavy, so it pushes down the ice, and the ice cracks here and there. So you can see right here, next to the little fish, there's a little crack, and the water goes through and it floods the surface. And maybe the snow is 1 inch thick, so it floods it and makes slush. And then the next day it freezes. So you kind of get this slush that's frozen. So that's called white ice. So you have the blue or say black ice, that blue line, and then the gray is kind of white ice. And then you might get more snow, or the ice, it's cold enough, the ice is expanding. So what happens, it pushes over to the shoreline, and you'll see these crimples, or it actually might run right up the shoreline, depending on the slope of the lake and stuff and the contours. But you'll get like a disturbance there, and you might even get a little flooding there locally because you're pushing down in the middle like a drum. So the water's got to come out somewhere. So it squirts out the side. So this is kind of a danger zone, that first meter or so, because that might have just formed like an hour before that it pushed out fresh water. And it's just a skim layer of ice there. So you want to kind of be careful here and get on the ice if it's safe enough. Like don't mess around the first, meter or two. Well, meter. And then this is what I was about to say here. Yeah, you're pushing and the water's squirting on and flooding this. So, this is a little bit suspect. And you could see what I did here. I drew a ramp, so it's pushing out this way, but this is more steep. So it can't go. It can only go vertical. So it's like a bump here. This is a little more dangerous because I think it's, more uh, possibility of water coming out this end. And then what happened with enough freezing, you kind of get like a sine wave happening. You'll get highs and lows on the lake surface where it's buckling. So maybe this section goes up and this section gets pushed down, and it, makes this kind of sine wave. So you'll be skiing or snowshoeing and you're in slush, and then you're up high and dry, and then you're back in slush, and you're up high and dry again. Then you're back in slush. And that's not so much of a problem snowshoeing, but when you're skiing, that slush gets on your ski. And remember, it's -5, -10. So that water freezes to your ski. And now you have like powder snow. So now you got a big clump of stuff in the bottom of your ski. So you end up, scraping your skis. Okay, everything's good. So that took 5 minutes. And you go back into another slush puddle. So those conditions are not great. Generally, you would stay off the lakes in those conditions. You stay in the woods more. Um, okay. And then, the cycle continues, it floods, it freezes. So you can see the ice, the black ice is getting a little thicker. The other gray ice is, piling up and it's doing its thing. And at some point, you've got this combination of black ice, white ice, and it could be different layers because, you could get a rain. So you got 1 inch of water and then you got a -15 and it's black ice again on top of that. You can get different layers. You can have even water between the layers depending on how everything froze. If you get a big snow dump on top, it kind of insulates so the layer below didn't freeze and it takes a while to get down there. There's all kind of possibilities that happen. So here's a classic example. I don't know, this is probably January time frame. There was 6 inches ice here, but then it rained, and then you could see it slushed a bit, and it's slush right here, so maybe a inch or two deep. But under there's 6 inches of white ice basically, so strong enough to support people. So I just mentioned here. The middle is sunk. You can see the sides are a little drier, but still slush. I would say the risk area is down the middle. You cross over, you try to walk where it's less water. This is a good example. I call it an ice spider. And when ice cracks, there might be, for example, this example, there might be a crack running this way, but the crack is only like an eighth of an inch, or not even open. But what happens, because it's pushed down, the water's rushing up through the crack. So an ice spider it was a crack or two, and the water rushed up and started drilling a hole basically. And then all the little cracks that came off that initial, junction point, because the water is pouring through, it's starting to open up the cracks. So you end up with this very, artistic spider. So this is like a big overview of a spider, and this is like a close-up view. So you can see the water rush through and it froze, but unless you drill the hole, you don't know if this is like, a half inch of black ice and then water right under it, or is it 8 inches of, black ice? So generally stay away from this. Like, why go there if you can just walk around it? So I generally don't go through a spider. I'll go around it. And when I say around it, this person is safe. But I wouldn't walk here or all these openings. They could be just, half inch of ice. And you'd break and you'd get a foot wet, but you wouldn't go anywhere. Um, yeah, so I said avoid this thing. It could be 12 inches thick or it could be a half inch thick. So there's just another view of a spider. This is a bigger one. You could see this is a couple feet across this thing. So again, you'd walk around this somewhere so you don't go right over the top of this thing. The little bit of danger here is if you got a big snow dump and you're, winter camping and traversing, you don't see this. So, it's just that's a risk. But generally, you would see it. But there's another example. This is just a little pond. I mean, it's just a depression. It's not even a 6 inches deep here. But one problem when you have a pond, there's a lot of decay in a pond, and you got a lot of heat buildup. And on top of that, this, froze, and then there was a pile of snow that came on top. So that snow insulates it. And the ponds generally have a lot of grasses and stuff that are decaying. So the pond has got like a heat source. So the pond never really gets like cold like a lake does. It freezes first because it's small body, but it never really goes more than 6 inches thick. So in this case, this is probably January, February. We're walking across with snowshoes on, and it was really deep snow, and you could see we're not getting wet, but it's wetness basically. So all of a sudden, somebody got in this area, and everybody's deviating around it, of course, to avoid it. This is another picture. I think this was like Frontenac or something. We had like a couple days in a row at -15 to -20. And when we finally got there, the lake was like literally 12 inches thick of this white black ice. I mean, you could see the rocks under there. It was really neat. But all the cracks are going every which way. So it was very artistic. And I can't remember if this is Frontenac or not, but it was, we had situations like that. So, what happens is the ice is expanding and it's, cracking. It's kind of brittle. Um, this is like an early season, maybe probably December, Queen Elizabeth II wildlands, looking down at Sheldon Lake. So you can kind of see things here. There's a hole, so the water rushed through there and you could see a lot of white ice. So there was snow and it flooded. There's a hole with a little spider starting. There's discoloration here. You can see other holes over here. It's a good view. You could see all this thing. You could actually see flooding over here. So I don't think we went on the lake on this outing. We just were hiking along the ridges here. So this was like early, well, probably mid-December kind of thing. So the ice wasn't quite there. But if you give it a week in freezing temperatures, it would have been fine. Okay, there's a lot of words here, but I just kind of reiterate, light gray or black ice or dark ice where it's discolored. I would stay away from that. White and opaque is that snow, freezing, white ice. And white ice is perfectly strong enough for what we're doing if you got the right thickness, 4 inches. And the best ice is black or blue or clear ice. I mean, they go by different names by depending on what you're looking down through. And then in the spring, usually you get this kind of slushy ice. I mean, it's just starting to fall apart because the sun is cooking it. It's getting like a slushy kind of consistency, like some people call it rotten ice. So there's lots of words here. I won't have to bore you with all that, but and then just some other features you can see. So this is a classic along a big lake. Everything's expanding. I mentioned it was buckling, and you can kind of get an idea of the thickness of the ice. There's ridges sometimes in lakes where two things are coming together, and maybe you're on a point, and it's, the rocks are not that deep, so it's going up on the rocks and buckling. So generally, kind of stay away from the ridge line because that's where the water could be squirting out and making like a spider hole there. I mean, sometimes you got to traverse, but just try to pick a route that, is not going over something big and you don't know what's down here. And generally, when you traverse that, use your ski poles and like really sound the ice by hitting it. And you'll hear a sound. If it's solid ice, it's got like a tick. And if it's hollow or there's an air pocket, you hear a talk. So tick or talk. Talk, it sounds like there's a gap there between the ice and the water. And a tick, it sounds like solid. Over here is another lake with flooding in different patches. This is this sine wave thing I was talking about earlier. Okay. Oh, I just was talking about this. Yeah. So when you're going with your ski pole, so, typical ski pole, one of these kind of things, you hit the ground and it goes tick, or if you hit it and there was a little air pocket, you'll get talk. And you get talk sometimes on beaver ponds because the water is going up and down in beaver ponds. And the ice could have formed and the water dropped because the beaver dam is leaking or whatever. And the ice is suspended with trees and rocks and whatever. So there's a gap and you'll actually hear the talk where, yeah, we're up on the ice, but it's not on the water really. And sometimes what happens, you walking there instigates the crack. And all of a sudden you hear this big thud, it sounds like a thunder roar. It's, well, like a muffled tug, and it will freak you out. You're walking, and all of a sudden the ground kind of, moved a micron, and you hear this crack or thud. Sometimes you hear, especially in the spring and the early winter, everything's growing and dronching, and the water's going up. You hear a lot of kind of noises from the sounds of the ice, especially if you're camping on the ice or even on the shore. You'll hear this boom, 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 and it's a little concerning. So I've got a video of a couple sounds that I recorded over time, and I'll give you a listen here. All right, that gives you a kind of idea. Hopefully you can hear all that. Um, so maybe you ask the crowd, has everybody okay with hearing that?
Yeah, that
Yep.
was super cool.
Yep.
Okay, good, good.
Yep.
Yeah, if you go on the internet, you'll see other ones. I was trying to get the one with the thud, but I couldn't find one. It's one of those things where it happens once every, I don't know, half an hour, depending on where you are, especially in the spring when the water is really moving around, the lake's going up and down like a yo-yo. It really makes a lot of noise. It's actually, it'll wake you up in the middle of the night, even if you're on shore. I've had some scary ones where I built a Quincy on the lake and you hear that. Dun-dun-dun-dun. That's really scary because you think the whole Quincy's going to go down, but it didn't. Okay, so here's the recommended thicknesses. 2 inches, stay off. 4 inches, you can walk, ski, ice fishing. 5 inches for snowmobiles. 8 to 12 for cars, small pickups, and 12 to 15 for trucks. I've been on ice, like ponds, 2 inches thick, and it's fine, but they recommend four. Of course, it's better. But I've gone across, areas that are about 2 inches thick where it's only a couple feet deep pond. Okay, so lakes. Small bodies of water freeze first, medium bodies next, larger
Question, Gary.
bodies.
Uh,
Excuse me?
do you know? Yeah. Do you know what kind of thickness you can poke a hole in the ice with your pole?
1 inch maybe?
1 inch.
Yeah, I would say 1 inch with a normal ski pole. I
Okay.
mean, it kind of depends on the ice. If it's white ice, it's not as strong, maybe 1.5 inches. Um, Generally, I would say maybe 1 inch, but we can bring that up in the discussion at the back end if people have other things. Okay, so small, medium, large bodies. Of course, small body will freeze first, and the largest will freeze later. Lake ice in our area is typically 8 inch plus in the middle of winter. Water at the bottom lake's 4 degrees. Water just under the ice is 0 to 4 degrees, and it's minus whatever above it. Marshes, this is a little tricky thing because marshes, as I mentioned, is filled with a bunch of organics that are rotting, bulrushes. It's not very deep, so they'll freeze first. The first thing that's going to freeze in the lakes and the ponds will be the ponds. But what could happen here is because you got some heat buildup, you don't actually get super thick ice. Out of all the drillings I've done over about 30, 40 years, I never have gone beyond, say, 6 inches on a pond. They always seem to be max 6 inches. They'll get to that 4 or 5 inch fairly quickly, and then over the course of the winter to get maybe 5, 6. Depends on the pond. And like I depicted here, I can drill a hole in the middle and it'll be 5, 6 inches. But right here, I could poke my pole through and see water. Because what happens is the bulrushes and this kind of gray stuff is snow. It piles in here, and with all this organics happening here, it's basically water here. So the tricky thing is getting on and off ponds. So avoid the bulrushes. Try to go on and off a pond where there's a big rock or no vegetation. Because once you're on here, it's safe, but it's the off and on is the problem for ponds. This gives you a typical picture. There's bulrushes. So if you're crossing, don't go across right here. Go where there's no bulrushes. Another thing is beaver ponds. We're traversing, and we're coming across beaver ponds everywhere. Um, and beaver ponds is basically it's like a dam, and it's water's here, and it wants to get down here. So the dam is leaking. It's not 100% sealed. And usually at the bottom of a beaver dam, you'll see, open water because it's moving, but you don't see it up here. So here's the danger. If you're coming from the high side, you're walking along, you see a line, and if you just walk to the edge of the beaver dam, it's paper thin here, maybe. It's 6 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch, zero. That's where you're going to go in, and this is the deepest part of the beaver pond. It could be 4, 5, 6, 7 feet, depending on how high the beaver dam is. Generally it's a couple feet, 3, 4 feet, but I've seen beaver dams, 12, 16 feet high, big beaver dams. When you're coming from the low side up, you see the water. So it's not much of a danger because you see it, you go to the side, and then you avoid this because you're already on the side of the beaver dam. But the worst is coming from the high side. That's the dangerous thing. One other thing, when you're coming from the high side, I mentioned here, sometimes you can smell the water. So you got that beaver water smell. So if you're walking on the high side and you smell that kind of organic water, you know there must be some fresh water down here leaking through. So that's another indication that, yeah, this is a possible danger zone. So how do you know where the water is going? Um, so you look at the land, and the trees are generally, the same height trees, but where there's a depression, it means there was a valley there. So this is a beaver pond here, and it has to flow. So it's going down that valley somewhere, and the same thing's happening over here. It's either coming in or it's going out, depending on the lay of the land. But you can kind of see from the contours, there is a valley. There is a valley. Is the water coming in or going out? When you get there, you'll find out. But again, you'll know you're on the high side or the low side of the dam. Also, walking, like this could be a portage between two lakes or ponds, or it could be a little creek between two ponds and lakes. So you can kind of see the contours of the snow. All of a sudden, there's like depressions. And what that means is there was a creek here, and actually, it's enough water flow, it melted all the snow above it. So you don't want to walk right up the middle of this because that's where the creek is. And you can kind of see the contour here. So you have to, when you're looking ahead, maybe the easiest right down the middle is not the safest. So you kind of have to kind of look at it and look at the contours and pick your preferred low risk route on this side or the other side. Um, this is what I was talking about when you're going along and you see, there's the contour of the valley. So you know the low part is there. So either the water's coming in or the water's going out. When you see a big straight line, that's a beaver dam. So really, if you don't want to go right to the middle here because that's probably where the main creek is going down the middle of this valley. You really want to kind of go to the edges and then work your way along the edges. Or even when you get to the end of the beaver dam, you can almost see it. It's about a foot high here. You would look over it and there'll be either a drop. In this case, it's a drop of a few feet, and it meanders over. So maybe the water goes over this way, or it goes down the middle, or over that way. But you come on this, and you have to make a decision, go left or right. So you can go either way at this point, and then you make a decision when you get to the edge of the beaver dam. Like, where is the water going? If it's going this way or that way. And if it happens to be going across your path, then you come back and you go the other way and go around the valley that way. This is what I was talking about. Here's a classic beaver dam. So this is high, paper thin, and then it drops a few feet, and the water keeps going down the creek system. So, over here, like over maybe another 5, 10 meters, maybe it's 4 inches, and then it goes paper thin till water. So obviously that's high risk there, and low risk would be, upriver more. Um, we're on top of a beaver dam. You can see the beaver dam's going all the way along with the blue there. So that's the beaver dam. So right down the middle, that's where the creek's going. That would be high risk. It would be, possibly thin ice on the edge here, but there's a drop of a couple feet there. This is the highest risk. This drop is maybe a foot or two would be lower risk. And you can almost see, I don't know if that's a rock or I think that's a rock there, but it'd be lower risk on the edges here. So you kind of decide, do I go left or right? I'm thinking left would be because you can get through here. This looks thick. So you also want to look ahead. Okay, once I get left, can I go through the woods reasonably easily? Because there is no trails, you're just bush crashing, right? So here's a beaver dam coming from the bottom side. You see the water down here, and you're looking up the 4 feet, and you can see it's paper thin there, and the water's, forming, and then it's frozen back there. So again, you go to the side and you kind of look at it and figure which way you want to go. Little like aerial shot of this maybe. And beaver dams go on for like a while. They meander through to keep the water in. But you could see the water is coming through here somewhere through the beaver dam and forming the creek. And there's a little bit of open water over here. So again, I'm on this side, so I'm going to pick to go around this way and get back to thicker ice to cross this. So beaver lodges are another little danger thing. There's beaver activity, and they're popping up here and there, and again, there's sticks and whatever they're doing all winter. So you've got to be aware that when you come on a lodge, there could be like areas they pop through, and they went running for some twigs or something to bring them back in their thing into their den. The other thing is they're in there, so there's a family in there, and there's heat. So usually at the top of the beaver lodge, you'll almost see the frost of their breath coming through because it's just porous. So the moisture from them is coming through, and you'll see almost like a little vent holes up here. And I know when I bring my dog on trips, she gets right up there and sniffing because she knows there's a beaver in there. I mean, that's where all the smells are coming out. And you could see the frost, so you know there's something living in there. So this is what I was mentioning. So here's a classic top of a lodge. You could see it's melted because there's heat up here, but everything else is snow covered. And then there's also river otters. They're active generally in these little marshy water areas all winter. Um, they are fishing and swimming and whatever they're doing. And usually their den and their swimming hole is like really close to each other. You'll see a lot of poop and stuff. So it's obvious. And then you'll see these otter slides where they're running and they're sliding, coming out of the woods or whatever. So there is open areas that will be kept open just because of the otters. So again, there's a spider here, but it's actively being in and out, so the ice is not going to form easily. And there's a classic marsh. I'm on this side, I have to get to that side. So you want to pick your route, and you can almost see the wetness here. And this is the middle of winter. Everything else is like 6 inches thick, 8 inches thick, but there's a river going through here and it's a marsh. So you don't want to go right through the bulrushes. If anything, you want to go around the bulrushes where, it's actually, ice, but you can see there's a wetness here. So I would not pick this route across here. I would go up or down river a bit, looking for a pond where the water is a little more slow or not moving, and then the ice will be better. So I graphically kind of showed that, it's paper thin. Almost you could see the water, and then it's thick, and then it's paper thin, etc. So these bulrushes are high risk areas. And here's an example. I poked my pole, and it was like 5, 6 inches over to the right a meter, and here it's like water because it's insulated and its organic growth is decaying there. So here's another, classic meadow, creek going through here. And I try to highlight, it's hard to see in the photo, but there's these depressions where I circled in red. So you can almost see there's a creek going this way, and on the other side of the valley is another creek. So you don't want to follow that. You want to go wide this way or around that way. And I said over here because there's little depressions, but they're very small compared to these bigger depressions. So there's a creek coming through here, but this would be the safer spot to cross, lower risk. And then this area is a creek that's open water, so there's no real way across this unless you went downriver or upriver and look for a good pond where there's, not as much water movement, or it could be a beaver dam pond where there's not much water movement and you could find some ice to cross there. Here's a classic little creek. You're going and you want to get across this. Um, I mean, there's animal tracks on here, foxes and whatever running around, but they weigh nothing. So it's a high risk area, especially on the outer bends of these creeks. That's where the water is usually fastest. The inner bend would be safer, but you want to get across. So if I would pick something, you have to pick something that's wide and you figure minimal water movement for a lower risk area. Here's a good example. Before the trip, you get on Google Maps, and usually in the winter, they have the winter version. So this is Crooked Lake in Queen Elizabeth II. We actually doing a winter camping trip, and we were traveling along here. We knew this is in Narrows in the summer. It's like a class, one rapid. And so we were coming along, and we knew we had to get to the shore because we wanted to go down here. And I think one trip we actually went this way to the right. Another trip we went down and kept going. Um, but you could see it on the satellite. There's the flow, no ice, and then it trickles underneath. It's like 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 5 inch. So over here it's probably six, and over here is 6 to 8. But once you get out of the flow, it's good ice again. So this is the actual spot that I just showed you on one of the winter camping. So of course the satellite shot, this one was you know, 3 months before or the previous winter. I don't know, probably previous winter. And then this shot is when I did the trip. Oops. So we're coming along the end here. We went across and it's open water going down the river here, of course. Generally, you can look at maps and where there's a necking of a lake, all the water is heading for the ocean. So which way it's going, wherever there's a necking of a lake, there's going to be a flow there. I don't know how much flow, but it's an area that's a higher risk when it's a necking area. So this will give you an example of what I'm talking about. You're on the south side, you want to get to the north side. There's a creek and it's opening up into a valley, and there's another creek coming in here, and the river keeps going. Um, when you're looking at a map, you can kind of tell the direction of the flow by looking at maybe beaver dams sometimes. That will give you a clue. When the beaver is making its dam, they usually form a kind of a contour like that, and the water is going left to right. Um, when the water is rushing in here, this is like, maybe wet or open water because there's rapids. The outside bend will be fast water, the inside will be slower water. The outside bend of this lake is faster water. There's a creek coming here, so that's a danger spot. And then a danger spot is necking down. So if you're going to cross, the lowest risk is where this widens out and then across or over here. I kind of depicted it with this white stuff where this is more shaky kind of, you know. Um, I mean, you might see just white ice, but it'll be thinner ice because obviously there's water flow there. Okay, so risk mitigation, I mentioned before the event, do some research, look at Google Maps, plan stuff by looking at satellite photos, have your self-rescue plan and gear, and I'll explain that a little bit. And then a group rescue. So in 5 winds, we usually have a throw rope for per group and self-rescue, and I'll explain some self-rescue stuff. During the event, you have a plan on a winter camping or whatever, but during the event, assess the situation and always go for the low risk. Or if it's too dicey, just don't do it and pick a plan B. And then post event, after the fact, say something happened, you got a soaker, you got a, wet foot, you got a whatever. Um, Review what went right and what did not go right, and revise your plan and lessons learned in your own personal plan, a group plan, and maybe even at a club level. So at the club level, at the 5 winds, we had this incident report, which is a great vehicle to explain to yourself, to the group, and to the executive what exactly happened. So it was always like, what could I have done different so it didn't happen? And then if I was the leader, okay, me as a leader, what could I have done different to not make it happen? And then as a club executive person, okay, what do we have to do so it doesn't happen again? Do we have to train people? Do we have to add something to our guidelines? etc. So it's kind of like always after any event, you kind of self-reflect, group effect, and try to figure out if there's a better way to do it. So I mentioned before, I think I talked about a lot of this stuff, but I'll show you some stuff here. Look at topo maps, Google Maps, historical weather data. You can go back if you're not used to an area. Another little thing is interesting. Snowmobile clubs. They have some great websites where they tell you it's green, yellow, red. That's a great indicator because the snowmobile club is saying green is a good trail. It's open. And if the trail's going across a lake, it's 5 inch plus based on that. You also have local webcams. There's one at Hunting Harbor. Excellent. You're looking at this marina and you can actually see, oh, the ice is forming. And then you can see skidoo traffic. So you know it's 5+ inches thick because the skidoo guys went on it. I talk to locals, ice fishermen, snowmobiles as you're trucking along, and I don't know, you pass somebody, you just ask them the question, have you checked the ice? How thick is it? And they'll say something. So it's another data point. Talk to others that have done the route that you're planning to do, and they might say, "Oh yeah, that's a really dangerous spot at Gibson River. It's always open," or whatever. Check conditions personally with an ice drill or an axe. So I'll just highlight some stuff. This is Algonquin Park, south of Highway 60. Uh, so at the time, I said right here, this is Porcupine Lakes, this is smoke up here. We're coming down, and I said, I'm not going this way. I'm going to go through this little bush crash portage to avoid because you could see there's a next spot here at Big Pork, and that's exactly what I saw. That's where the water's necking down. So once we got across there, the open water was here, and I planned to avoid it. And the same thing over here. I jumped across this logging road into this lake, but you can tell the water's going, that way down the system. So I knew there's a bunch of portages here which means there's little rapids or something. So I said, okay, I'm not going down that way and over. I'm gonna bush crash across here and then, back this way. So I tried to avoid where I know there's some kind of rapids or stuff. So that's the pre-planning. You can look at Google Maps, and like I mentioned, the beaver ponds, they're always kind of arced. So it gives you an idea this water is going this way. This is high, this is low. And then once you look at Google Maps a bit, you can kind of, yeah, it's a tree and it's an evergreen and it's a rock and it's a whatever. This is an open marsh area that goes into a lake. The lake is black. Yeah, it'll be good ice down here. This will be a little bit dicey. The beaver pond probably be okay, but just around here it'll be dicey. So you're coming a left to right, you don't want to go through here. You'd want to go pick some route that you're not climbing a mountain too much but maybe it's just across here, a pond, and then you're back bushwhacking again. So you want to pick a route based on what you see and with experience, you can read these um, satellite images, and you were there maybe on a different event, but you now know what gray and brown and green mean. And the same with here, this is a kind of a marshy area with some bulrushes and whatever. Um, you get a flavor. Another important data point is the weather information from Environment Canada. You can look at an area, you can type in a latitude, longitude, cold water. It's on our 5 winds. And you could see, the previous year or something. Okay, it's minus, it's positive, it's, positive, it's minus. What you're kind of looking for is net, it's below freezing. So you look at this minimum temperature in January, I mean, it's always below freezing. So the ice is forming. There's only slight little blips above. So the ice is not going to disappear with these little blips. And then the highs of the day, there's only a couple blips up there, but mostly it's on the colder side. And then the mean is mostly cold. So the ice is getting thicker and thicker with these kind of conditions historically. Um, I mentioned Snowmobile Trail. This is the interactive trail guide. And this is the website here. So you look at it, green, yellow, yellow, it's operational, but it's not great. But you can see the trails going right across this lake. So you know it's safe. So this is what is this? This is 6 Mile Lake here. And McCrae's up here. So you can kind of see it doesn't matter. You can look at the whole thing, but you see it crossing a lake. So you know every lake in this area is going to be that kind of conditions probably. Unless there's a water flow, of course. During the thing, this mitigation, come up with a plan, know how to self-rescue yourself, to get out yourself. Um, if the situation, you might have to change to plan B. Um, uh, group rescue effort. So, if somebody goes in or multiple people go in, you have a overall group effort plan. Get person out of the wet gear, get person into dry clothes. This is a little bit depends on where you are. If you're like 5 minutes from the bus, forget it. Just hustle to the bus. If you're an hour, then you really got to strip down and get out of the wet stuff. And also depends on if it's like zero, then an hour you could probably handle it. It's not pleasant, but you're not going to freeze. You're not going to get frostbite. But if it's minus 20 and you're an hour, you got to get out of the wet stuff. So in 5 winds, we have this 20-liter, 30-liter backpack with a bunch of stuff in it. But if only one person got wet, you can group up some of your gear, right? Um, Somebody got an extra fleece, somebody's got an extra this, somebody's got an extra that, and you end up stripping that person down, getting all the wet stuff off, get back into some dry stuff. You might look like hodgepodge, but you're dry and you're cold, but you're dry again, so you'll be okay. Worst case scenario is you got to ask for help, so you got to sit put. So, get people and thing, get a fire going, a warm drink and food, fire, shelter, recover gear. Sometimes it's hard to get out of a frozen pond with skis and snowshoes on. Sometimes you get out and within like 5 minutes, everything's frozen solid. You can't undo the binding. You can't get out of your, stuff. So zippers freeze. A lot of stuff freezes. Depends on how cold it is. So in the 5 winds case, you can call and, find out our leaders, tell them what the situation is, and come up with a plan B, A, C, whatever, and, get out of trouble. Um, what can you do during, I kind of mentioned a lot of the stuff, talk to people, ice drills, I'll show that shortly. Fishing poles, check thickness, read the ice and landscape, contours of land, ice colors, ice sounds, ice movements, and review the plan with people if somebody gets a soaker. Talk to locals. I won't, read every word here, but basically talk to people. This is the trick if you're coming across, say, somebody's fishing on, Gibson Lake or wherever, 6 Mile Lake. There's a hole there. The guy's using the hole. Well, you can take your ski pole and basically put it under the ice, bring your hand down to this area and grab the pole. So now you got a marker from where your hand is to the pole. You pull it back out and you could say, oh, it's 8 inches, or it's 3 inches, or it's, 12 inches. That's a really quick way to check the ice with not having really anything except your ski pole. You could look down the hole, but it's because of the angle, the light and the thing, it never appears as deep as it really should be. So I might actually measure 8 inches. When I look down the hole, I say, it looks like 4 inches. So its best thing is to measure it with the ski pole idea. When you're walking across ponds, because ponds are moving up and down, or the beaver dam, the beaver got eaten by a fox or coyote or something, and all of a sudden the dam blew, the pond drops, 2, 3 feet or whatever. It just drops because it's always leaking. So the pond was up here and it froze and it was, 4 inches thick. And all of a sudden it dropped. So there was a stump and the ice got popped up and all the other ice is down here. So just looking at this, at some point the ice was at least 4 inches thick, which is down here now. And it could even be thicker. And of course, where this broke, well, maybe around here it's not so thick, but you're not walking there, you're walking around. But this is a quick indicator on, how thick the ice is, previously, a couple of weeks ago. Test the ice, test the thickness of ice. Um, yeah, so generally this is the biggest factor is like early in the season when it's like the first couple times out. But once you tested the area for once or twice, it's only going to get better. And then the same thing at the back end of the season, when you get to March, April, and things are starting to fall apart again, turn into spring, the ice is deteriorating. So you want to start checking it again. But in the middle of the season, February, you don't really have to because you checked it before and after. It's only better now because it's been cold. So there's a couple methods. So I just listed obvious ice fishermen. They have these ice augers, this big thing here, or motorized versions. They're like 10 pounds plus. You can carry a long handle axe, and it's got to have a long handle because you imagine you're 8 to 10 inches deep here. You need about a 21-inch handle to get down to the bottom if you were chopping to, get water or whatever. So it's got to be a long handle. Doesn't have to be a huge axe, maybe a pound or two at the end, but you're talking 2 or 3 pounds of weight for an axe. Or you can bring a chisel and connect it to a pole. That's 1.5 to 2 pounds. Or I had this ice drill I made, which is this thing right here. So it's kind of deployed. It looks like this. It's a 8-inch bit with a spring-loaded joint and then kind of a hand crank thing, and then you could compress this spring and fold it
Yep.
into itself. There's a question from the audience? Okay, nope. So I would clip this to my pack in this condition, and then when I want to show people how thick it is, I'd pull it out, and it would take me literally 10 to 20 seconds to drill 8 inches. The beauty of this thing is like a hard ice, it would take say 20, maybe even a little bit more, but I get a sense of the hardness of the ice. And if it was really soft ice, it would be literally about 10, 15 seconds to get through, kind of white ice. So this is what it would look like. It's 8 inches long. And if I don't go through, when I pull it out, no water comes. I know it's 8 plus. If I go through, yeah, I can feel it pop through at, 6 inches or 5 inches or 8 inches. It just all of a sudden leaps forward or into the ice. And then when you pull it out, the beauty of this, you could pull it out and it would just pull the water right up like a suction. And you can immediately say, oh yeah, that was 6 inches when I popped through. So it was a really neat thing. It, weighed 230 grams. I lost that 2 years ago. So now I've got this thing, which is, they call it, it's from Mech and they call it an ice screw. So climbers use it to screw into ice, and then you put your carabiner on here and your ropes. It's really light. So this one's an expensive one because it's aluminum. So all this is aluminum. This part's steel, and just the end bit is steel. It's 110 bucks, but it's only 110 grams, and it's about 8.5 inches long. Um, it's got a good screw on it, so you just start off very slowly, and I have a video to show you. And it literally goes, I don't know, again, 15, 20 seconds. You can do it 8 inches, no problem. And the same thing, you're screwing it, and all of a sudden you feel there's no resistance because you're not cutting ice. The lead here is a 1/4 inch. So every turn you advance a 1/4 inch. There's about 4 inches of lead and then 4 to 5 inches of no lead. So the next video shows a little video.
Okay, so what you do is point of the ground here. You clear the snow from the lake or the ice of the pond. Give yourself some area. We're using an ice drill, and you start it off by just screwing it in by hand, and then eventually you can use the handle, and you get an idea You could feel resistance, and right there it broke through. So it's about that point that was thickness of ice. Then you unscrew it. And then the water comes through. So if you just poke at it, you could see it's looks like about 4 inches, but again, use a stick to check it. And this is the ice drill. You just make sure the inside is clear before you stow it away. And it is. Okay, that's it. What you need is a small little stick with a little end on it. And the idea is you put it in the hole and you hook it under the bottom of the ice, and it's about there. So that gives you an idea. It's about 6 inches, 5-6 inches thick here. We're on a pond right now, so ponds generally only, freeze to 5-6 inches max.
All right. It's one little video of that.
Okay. So what?
All right. Another method, and this could be any time of the year, you're going across a pond, and because the pond is moving up and down, generally, especially in the springtime, um, and there's heat from the sun hitting the trees that are growing, so they're warm. Usually there's a little open water here, especially in the springtime, but it could be even in the middle of winter. But you can see there's like a beaver activity hut here. You're walking, this is totally walkable. This is like, I don't know, 8 inch, or not, 4 inches, 5 inches thick ice here. But when you're walking, if there's water there, you can sense the thickness of the ice by looking at the ripples in the water. So I found, like, if you start seeing ripples, and if they're big ripples, it's less than 2 inches thick. If it's just a small ripple, it's about 4 inches. And why I say those numbers? Because I actually made drill holes. So I would, walk and see the ripple and drill a hole, and oh, it's 2 inches only. Okay. Then I'd walk and see, like, not as I see a ripple, because you're always going to have a ripple because you're walking and the surface is vibrating a bit. I could see a smaller ripple and it's 4 inches of ice. Or if it's in a creek area where you can actually see open water and you're walking, you'll see the ripple. So it gives you a real sense of how stiff the ice is, i.e., how thick it is. So again, here the pond dropped an inch or two. You can see the ice was there, and now it's down here somewhere. Pond level changes. Another thing, a satellite shot, McDonald River and McCrae Lake area. This is black, which means open water, and then you can kind of see there's ice here, but there's no snow cover. And then there's a little more snow cover, and then there's a little more snow cover. So there is a flow going this way and around this way. But you can almost tell there was no ice. There's some ice with zero coverage on snow. And this whole area obviously got the same snow, but it means the snow hit and there was water, so it melted or turned into ice, white ice. And then this one iced up before this one because there's more snow. And this one iced up before this one because there's more snow. So it's almost like an indicator on looking at the shade color of the satellite picture. Another example I had, I was walking down the Gibson River, and 12 inches deep snow, 6 inches. We're snowshoeing, right? Open water, um, bare ice, no snow, 3 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches. So it's getting deeper where the water's moving slowly, open big bay, and then it narrows down as open water again, and open water, and this is open water because there's a big dam here flooding in. So the snow depth also gives you an idea. Okay, so self and team rescue. So you got a couple things you can do. You should have a whistle. So if you ever got in trouble before or after people, you can blow your whistle. It's sitting right like on your backpack, shoulder straps, and you just give it a toot, and people are gonna head snap around. To get out, everybody's got ski poles, and on the end of your ski pole, there's a carabiner, or not a carabiner, carbide tip usually, or even a steel tip, but a carbide's better, and you can register. So now you can pull yourself out if you're up to your, armpits in water. There's also these things called ice picks where you wear around your neck, usually under your jacket. It depends if I'm in a high risk area, I'll bring them outside my jacket. If I'm in a low risk area, I'll put them inside my jacket. So they're just hanging around my neck. So if I was crossing a dodgy creek or something dodgy, I'd bring them out. And then you could put your poles together back to back. So you're passing the strap. So now your pole, instead of being, 5 feet long, it's 10 feet long. You can kind of, hang it out for people to grab. And then you got a throw rope per group, just like a throw rope for, canoeing. You send it. So you're safe. You're on the side. The person's in the water, can grab on. Or if the person is lost all feeling, you can kind of make a loop and then lasso them. Generally, the beauty of falling through the ice when you're just snowshoeing or skiing, you're not going hundreds of meters on nothing ice. The ice was good, and all of a sudden it broke. So it's only a meter or two of bad ice so you only have to get back a meter or two. If you're on a snowmobile, you're going 100 miles an hour, you're like skimming the water, and then you finally sink. You're hundreds of meters maybe from good ice. So it's this whole different story. I think it's quite easy to get out of trouble when you're just walking or skiing. The only negative is you got snowshoes and stuff, and they get sometimes stuck under the ice. So when everything collapses, it's like a check valve a bit, but you can get yourself out. Whip ahead, and I'll just break it down. The guy crashes through. So one of the issues is just like falling in the water in the spring in your canoe, there's like a gasp because it's like friggin' cold water, right? 4 degrees, 4 or 5 degrees, something like that. So it's like you gasp, and the worst thing you could do is open your mouth. So the best thing is you stick out your arms to kind of break your descent. And the same with your legs, you kind of like are trying to push, right? So you either suck them in or push them out, but you're trying to not go head under. And if the worst case, you get your head wet and you take in a pile of water. So you want to shut your mouth basically. So it's like a gas reflex if you get that sudden shock. So you can see he spread his arms and he's trying to capture the top of the thing, but he's going to go down. Uh, Simultaneously here, it's hard to make out, but this guy over here is past his white pole to Sergey. So he's got Sergey's pole is the black thing, but this is the guy on the shore, white pole that he's got. So the guy on the shore is bracing himself and he's pulling Sergey, that 1 meter to good ice again. You can actually, the guy on the shore could use a throw rope. He can use a ski, take off a ski and use a ski. There's a lot of things you can use. Uh, this gives you an idea. He's out. So he's got his poles there. So you could see it was good ice here, and then all of a sudden this was only half-inch thick or something. It was like it broke apart and just froze like an hour before or something. So this is what I was mentioning. Ice is breaking and you're going in, spread your legs, spread your arms to kind of like flap so that you don't go head under because the head is the worst. And then this is trying to indicate don't let water go in your mouth because you could be in real trouble then. Uh, and then the advice is you came from a direction, turn around. There was good ice where you came from. Get yourself registered on the good ice, kick your feet, and work your way out if it's just a self-rescue. Generally, this is a tough one because you are heavy. Everything's wet now, and you're trying to pull yourself up and over. It's like trying to get back in the canoe. It's hard to get around that gunnel. So this is where I mentioned the ice spikes. You can register them and get yourself positioned to get out. So this example here is people helping with ski poles and stuff. This person got a little throw rope. This was like a guy demoing the thing. And you could see him with his little ice picks registering, and now he's got something, and he could pull his body up while kicking. Once you get on the good ice, try to roll a bit to get away. This could be marginal, but get to some solid ice. I mentioned the gas reflex. I'm not going to read all this, but getting out, um, stab your spikes not at arm's length, like somewhere halfway between full extension and right up to your body. So you just want to pull yourself up 6 inches at a time and then re-register and another 6 inches. Because if you go arm's length, you don't really have the muscle strength to flex your arm in about 2, 3 feet. But you could flex your arm in about six, to a foot. So just take little bites and get yourself back up on top of the ice. And then roll to something solid, which you saw Sergey do. This guy's demo, he's got his ice picks, he's up to his armpits, and he's working his way, and he's out. Or I just did a demo here. You can use your pole. So this is how you put your poles together. You pass this pole through, and then you bring this one back here and you loop it over here, like I show here. And now you fully extend up. You got double length of your poles. The only thing is I have these adjustable poles here, so make sure those don't fall apart because the whole system gets screwed if that happens. But most people have solid poles, so they won't. But that's one way you can extend your poles to double the length. And then, you and your partner, they can even be an anchor and you pull yourself out, or you hold and they pull you, or either or. This is my demo of using your ski poles. So you don't have your ice picks, but you have your ski poles and you register them in the ice and you pull yourself out. Or if you're in an area that's snowy and maybe you punched a hole through with your foot, use your poles, spread out the load. So you're trying to, create like a ski here almost, where you can, climb your way out of whatever you got into. Lots of words, but plan A is to save yourself. Plan B is to have the group. So hitting the group things is, throw rope, skis, poles, long branches, clothing. Once you get out, extra clothing, how to make a fire. You can get something hot in you. Um, we're always in groups of 4 to 5, 6, 7, whatever. So it's a team effort. Whoever's not in the water, you guys get the fire going, two people. You guys call for help. You guys work on the victim, strip them down, bring the resources together, clothes and chemical pads and whatever. And generally, hopefully, the leader's not on the water. The leader's not always leading. The leader could be in the middle or the back. There's always like a change of leadership. Like the leader could be at the back, but he's got other people leading, breaking, so you're kind of sharing the thing. But ideally, whoever's not the victim becomes the leader and starts coordinating things where everybody's got to be doing something because the issue is the victim's obviously wet and cold at -10, but everybody else could be freezing at -10 too because they were just sweating and now they're not moving. So you want to give everybody a job, get the fire going, make some calls, tell the bus where the hell we are. It might need, emergency services, etc. So, here's an example of a soaker with my ski boot. So I got a soaker. But I do have a kitchen plastic bag, and I do have a dry pair of socks. So I took my soaker off, my wet sock. I tried to drain the boot as much as possible in my gaiter, and I put the dry sock on, and I put the garbage bag on, and I stick it back in the wet boot. So the advantage here is I need the boot because I have to ski out. The boot is kind of semi-frozen, but you drained it. The laces are kind of working. Maybe the zipper's not working. I don't know. But you have a dry sock on your foot now, and the garbage bag protects it from getting wet. Um, that's going to save you, even though the boot's wet. Same thing I've done with snowmobile boots where I got a soaker. So the wool inner boot, I took it out. It's a soaker. What I've done is I changed my sock. I put a new sock on. I might even ask somebody, do you have another sock? And usually people carry socks. So you put two socks on with the garbage bag and you put it into the carcass of the boot. So you don't have your wool liner anymore. You have two pairs of wool socks on. It's not the best, but it's better than having a wet liner. And then you walk out and then, or in this case, I was winter camping. So I dried the liner. I only had one wet one. I dried it. It took about 3 or 4 hours of, drying it over the fire, but I got it dry and I carried on my trip, the next couple of days. Uh, okay, if you're wet up to your waist, like I mentioned, getting dry clothes on is a must, unless you're only like 5, 10 minutes away from the bus or half an hour. It's a combination of if it's not that cold, you can go an hour with wet stuff on. If it's around zero, who cares? You just, you just grunt it and you bear with it. But if it's minus 10, 20 and you're wet, you got to get out of that wet stuff. And then the other thing, you have to make a decision fast because everything's starting to freeze. Zippers, your boots, your bindings, everything. So you're not going to be able to make a decision to get out of them because you can't get out of them. They're frozen onto you, zippers especially. So you have to make a decision quite up front. What do you have? And, do it. Chemical heat pads, de-icing the bindings, that's a problem. So, totally wet from full immersion, I would say strip down and try to get all the resources. You generally in our backpack, we have a little day pack, 20, 30 liters. We have a waterproof thing. We have our gaiters. We have a little foam pad to sit on too. So a combination of your backpack and the foam, you got enough things you can change and not be standing in the snow. You'll be standing on your backpack or on a thing, and you got other people to help you. So get all those people to help you, take off your stuff and whatever. Because one of the issues is your hands, you start losing dexterity after 5, 10 minutes. So your hands don't really work very well for zippers or tying your shoelaces or anything. And then, of course, once you get out of the wet stuff, ideally make a fire, get people to make a fire for you. Dry off. You might have to defrost your bindings to make them work again. And then I came to the end here. I just threw in this Dr. Gordon Giesbeck to whatever, popsicle professor. I think he's out in like Alberta or something. He's like a professor that kind of throws himself into the lake in the middle of the winter and sees what's going to happen. So he kind of does a hypothermia thing. Um, so you can find him on the internet. So I put a few links here, but you can just type in his name there and there'll be a pile of links. And it's very interesting to read. It gives you quite a good overview. I got a few slides left just to kind of, I talked about mild hypothermia, where you're kind of vibrating, but you're still okay, and you'll be okay in about 30 minutes. And moderate hypothermia, this is where you got real problems. You really should probably call for help to come get you to get out of this problem, like SAR people, Trenton, whoever. And then we got severe where, your body core is dropping, so you got some severe issues there. So I won't go into the details here, but and generally, if you're way out there and you're waiting for help, the best way is make a fire. So always carry like a ferro rod or a lighter, maybe the combination. Ferro rod is great. You can get it totally wet, shake off the water, and it's going to make a spark. And then this is a cotton ball. So I have a little baggie full of just cotton balls and Vaseline. That's the best lighter. You put a spark to it. This will burn for 5, 10 minutes, depending how big the lump is. You make a base of wood and then you burn. And that's a really good heat source. And what I do is you have a space blanket and you just put yourself on top of the fire. So you could be pretty wet and this will be pretty hot. So this is just, me rescuing myself, but this is like a demo, but it gives you an idea. You don't need much to get out of trouble. Recovery area. Yeah, I kind of said here, ideally you'd want to dig down, with your snowshoe or your ski or whatever you have, your backpack. But if the snow is deeper than 3 feet, just make a fire on top of the snow or on the pond because it's on ice. it's going to go for an hour or two. It's going to slowly melt, but it never goes all the way through the pond. It would take like 3, 4 hours to get through the pond to the water. So I've made fires on top of the ice before. It gets wet, but it's easy because you don't have to dig that much. Shelters and stuff, but you're not going to spend the night, hopefully. Um, and I mentioned the rest of the group, keep everybody busy doing stuff, collecting wood, making fire, helping you, contacting for help. And if you're wet, you're 25% faster heat loss, so you want to get dry. Garbage bags is a great way. You can wear a garbage bag as a shirt, so you can put your you know, some fleecy thing that's dry on, you can put your garbage bag on, and then if you had something on top that you wrang out, it's not dry, but if you don't have anything else, you're wearing it on top of the garbage bag, so your core is still dry. Depending on the scenario you got, you could have like a shell and you wrang it out, but it's not perfectly dry. It's not hanging on to water, but it's crusty ice. So you don't want to get your dry stuff wet again. So the garbage bag's a great one. You could use it as a skirt, as chaps, You can use it as a skirt and you can poke some holes in a head through it and use it as a rain shell or protection for your dry stuff. I mentioned the cotton balls, Vaseline. You just shove a couple of cotton balls, Vaseline glob in a baggie. You squish it around, and literally, I carry this in my life jacket in the summer and in the winter, of course, a little baggie with this ferro rod. And generally, the ferro rod, the actual striker from the store, I replace that with a hacksaw blade and that really makes the sparks. Some hand warmer thing, space blanket, hot chocolate, little pot or thermos, so you can make some hot water, and then obviously some extra clothes. And then post event, of course, you want to analyze this because you're an engineer type, and you want to kind of review what worked and what didn't work. And then the incident report, as I mentioned, document it and then, pass on the knowledge. So this presentation is kind of passing on the knowledge of, what worked for me. And I've gone through a couple scenarios. I never went up to my armpits, but I've got soakers on my feet, generally in the springtime. So, the summary is research, talk to people, carry what you should have in your day pack, have a look at this presentation, stay away from flowing water, stay away from beaver dams, depressions, inconsistencies, alders, marsh, cattails in the marshes. Those are the high risk, spread out and high risk. So if you're, doing something that's a little high, you don't have everybody clumped into 7 people next to each other, spread out. So if there is one person goes down, 1 out of 6 goes down. And that's the end of the presentation. So I kind of blasted through that, but I'm open to any Q&A. Let's see. Can everybody see me is the question. So if you got any questions, you can just unmute yourself and I'm going to turn this on. So I think I'm going to turn on.
Hey Gary, it's Larry. The little screw thickness tool. You said that was a mech?
Yeah, I got one right here, actually. Let me show you. Um, Let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
So I just made a little heat shrink thing. It comes with an official end that's just a little half-inch rubber thing, which would fall off. So I just made this heat shrink thing that screws on and kind of lightly heat shrunk it. Um,
Oh,
so
cool.
there it is. It's got a steel and a very aggressive biting thing. And generally, it's meant to go into like ice walls. So you screw it in and you put your carabiner on. I just got this little clip that ties to my pack. And I would recommend like a locking beaner because that's what happened the first time. I had a non-locking beaner. Something twisted and my drill went flying somewhere. So now I make sure I have a little dinky locking beaner here. It's about 8.5 inches long, officially 21 centimeters. It's about, I'm gonna guess like 5/8 or something. It screws in very easily. You saw in the video, that was white ice, but literally I went 6 inches in, I don't know, 10 seconds or something. It's very easy and it deploys by doing this, and then you just kind of, screw it. You can start off the first, like this, and then all of a sudden it just starts feeding itself down because the lead screw just feeds down, and it doesn't take much to screw in. I mean, it's literally just hand forces. Um, I bought this one. You can get like this is the most expensive, the longest and the most expensive, $110 plus tax. You can get like an 8 inch one, a 6 inch one, a 4 inch one, but to me, you can also get them just pure steel, so it's going to be heavier but cheaper. They might be like $50 on Amazon for like a 6 inch one. The other thing you want, I mean, you saw the stuff coming out the hole. The center core is where the drilling that comes out. Um, you don't need this much metal. If you want to be, lighter, you can grind some metal away because you don't need all this structure here. Um, so, it's meant to, have a fall on it. So it's pretty strong, like 22 kilonewtons or something. But it's basically all aluminum. Even this end is aluminum, except this is steel. It seems to work. I mean, if you're going to take groups out or you want to be comfortable, this is a light solution. Um, so that's that. I was going to show you the pole. Remember what I said? There's a carbide in the end, so it's really hard steel. Carbide is used to, it's like on your cement drill bit. It's very hard. In this case, I got like a telescoping thing, but some people have fixed. The ice picks, you can get commercial ones like a Canadian Tire, these things. So this goes around your neck on a string with an adjustment so you can put it high-low. But how it works is it breaks apart. So now you got, two ends and you kind of put your hands around it and then you go spiking along. And then when you stow it, ideally the spikes fit into each other, right? And that goes around your neck so you don't stab yourself. Now, this is a commercial one, like it's, I don't know, $20 or something. You can get them at Canadian Tire. I originally, because it was cheap, and I don't like the feel of plastic because it's kind of cold. I made these wooden ones. So I usually go with the wooden ones. So it's just a piece of 3/4 by, I don't know, inch and a half by about, I don't know, 5 inches long. And I drilled a hole in the end. I don't know if you can see that. There's the hole gone. Yeah. I guess it's this end. So, I drilled a hole all the way and I put like a big nail in up to about all the way up to here, say. And then on this one, I also have a hole down here. So the two parts come together, and it was one part originally, and I just, hacksawed or jigsawed probably. And it fits together. And I usually put a rubber band right here. Pass a rubber band. I don't have it on right now, but it basically sits on my chest and the wood is kind of warm, right? It's not cold, even though it's flopping around up here somewhere. If it's a high risk, I'll bring it outside my jacket, but if it's low risk, I'll put it in my jacket. So those are the solutions I have. So I can personally rescue, and then classic, throw a rope. You can group rescue. You use your pole. I've done a lot of work with ice drills. My original drill had the benefit when I popped through, the drill would dive forward, so I immediately knew it's 6 inches. The negative on this one is I'm drilling, I feel the resistance change. I have to unscrew it. I can't just pull it out because the lead here is holding it in the ice. So I got to physically unscrew it, whatever, 12 turns or whatever to get it out. But I would say this is a lighter solution. And everybody can buy one of these to make the homemade drill. You need a welder, you need to machine it, etc. So, and the only mod I would say is I don't want to stab myself. So I took the known end thing with some heat shrink that you can buy at Home Depot, and then I screwed it back on. So like I'll use this at the beginning of a hike. I'll prove to people the ice is good. Or if there's a high risk area, I'll, tech it out and try it again. But generally, I'd only use this once an outing just to prove that the ice is good. So I think,
Those picks, Gary, you can also buy the picks with the spring-loaded pins.
yeah,
And so what they do is they just retract,
yeah,
and it's every time you slam them onto the ice,
yeah,
yeah, the carbides will extend.
pop out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, there's different solutions. Even the little string, like I like this string I made because it's like soft and cottony, so it doesn't feel like it's biting into you. This is a little aggressive, right? It's this, and it's got this adjustment where you can lighten, but I don't feel as comfortable with this thing on because you could feel it digging in my neck because it's jostling in your jacket and it's doing whatever. It's just, I've got it. It's something that people can buy, but I don't feel as comfortable with it wearing it. But I have it if somebody needs one. So, I mean, there are probably different solutions. I think the key to this whole thing is I did a lot of drilling over 40 years. So like I'm like researching, okay, this is vibrating, how thick is it? Same with the beaver dam. I've crept up to the edge of the beaver dam saying, oh, 6 inches, 5 inches, 4 inches. And I know it's the last meter or so. That's where it really tapers. So just by drilling holes and creeping up to it and looking at the water vibrating. So it's kind of like I'm an engineer, so I like to, figure all that stuff out. Most people are not that scientifically into it. They just want to know it's thick enough and safe enough.
I was watching some of the free cold water immersion videos that are out there. There was a session running this week. I didn't get a chance to look at them all, but I'm having done the boreal rescue course in warm water last fall. I was going to put on because WCCA gets a 10% discount with any of
Hmm.
the boreal rescue courses. All you have to do is just show them a screen capture of your Nostogan address on the back of your journal,
Yeah.
and that can act as your evidence that you're a WCCA member. And the guys at Boreal, um, I saw a video that they were doing with a bunch of local Shawville, Quebec high school. They brought them out on the Ottawa River and they did a thing for their outers club. Well, they had survival immersion suits, which are suitable for
Like a dry suit. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and basically put you through the shock and sensation of actually jumping on the ice in 3 feet of water. Safe stuff, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a course folks should really take.
Yeah. The thing I'm offering, well, not offering, but saying here is more like you're snowshoeing, you're skiing,
Yeah,
the classic five wins, WCA people that do winter stuff. Um, it's just the, understanding the risk, and if you're going to take the risk, okay, where's the low risk area and where's the high risk area? So those are kind of lessons learned, um, by various years and people and, experimenting with ice drills and stuff like that. And using all the stuff around you to, maximize what you know. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Thanks for hanging in there. It's kind of a nice
Gary, I
one.
see that there was I just wanted to note, by the way, thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation. Of course. I just noticed there is a question that was left in the chat by Chris Mayhew, although it looks like he slipped out
Okay.
after that, but it was about your comment on the snowmobile trail maps and
Yeah.
using those to
Yeah. The
understand
Ontario
where,
Federation of
areas where ice
Snowmobile
might be
Club.
good and
Yeah.
that kind of
There's
thing.
a
So he was
link
asking
there.
about
Yeah.
whether the OFSC.
Yeah. Finish your thought there, Eric.
No, no, that was it. I was just cutting out anyways. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think he was just asking whether the OFSC link is the appropriate one. I assume it is, although I know there are
Yeah.
local clubs that
Yeah. It's the Ontario
maintain those.
Federation of Snowmobile Clubs. It's like all of Ontario. and there's a pile of clubs that input the data for their maps. So in the, Gravenhurst, well, really Ontario, you can click on that and get some really good information. And like I mentioned, there's a webcam in Honey Harbor that's very close to the, McCrae Lake area, like 10K away. So that gives you a good indication too. When you're here in Toronto area generally and you're looking and saying, I wonder if there's snow up there. And you just look at the webcam and go, yeah, there's a ton of snow. Okay, so I guess we'll call it a wrap. Um, I'm going to post this on YouTube. So, if you miss something, you can always rewind it and look at it. Or some of the screens I flew through, lots of words, but if you want to go back and do a still, you can read it if you wanted to. So, okay, thanks very much, everybody, for
Thanks,
joining.
thanks,
Thank you.
Gary.
Thank you very much. It was really helpful. And yeah, you ended up answering all my questions as you went through. So thanks.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
If anybody has any other questions, just contact me through the WCA. I'm the membership person now, so it's just membership, wildernesscanoe.ca or something. You'll see it on the site, and just, bounce off the question or give me a call or whatever. Um, yeah, I'm all about sharing and sending some insight so other people can enjoy the wilderness, just like I do. I mean, I like it in the summer with canoeing trips and the same thing in the winter. It's the same stuff you're doing. You're just traveling on snow versus the water. And you're actually using the same port test trail sometimes, between uh, bodies of water and stuff. The beauty of the five winds, it's a lot of bush crashing. I mean, if you want to learn bush crashing, join the five winds. It's a serious, hardcore club. Same with WCA. I mean, we're doing some, normal little nothing trips to fun trips to massive, northern trips. There's all kind of trips to pick from. So it's a great way to learn a sport. And you'll meet some great people. All
Great.
right.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Gary.
Bye.
So long,
Thanks so much,
everybody.
Gary.
Thank
Fantastic
you.
stuff.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.